All right. So a quick view of the attendees list. I'm thank you all for coming and being available to discuss the charter with us. This represents not the end, but the penultimate end of the Charter Review Committee. We have been meeting now since January of last year. We've met periodically. We'll go through the process in the slideshow, but we've had a lot of discussions on what the charter means, a lot of learning to learn what a charter is for a municipality. It's an odd duck in the legal and policy world to figure out what it is and what it could be. I do want to take a moment before we start just to thank everybody on the committee. Despite all of our meetings, I've really enjoyed the time we've spent talking about it. I've enjoyed very much going through everything and debating different policy pieces and doing a little bit of a linguistic dance, and the way you guys interacted with all of the visitors we had and the attention you gave it. So just, for me, thank you. It's nice to be chair, but I had very little to do since you guys just let the thing run itself with your dedication. So thank you so much. On that basis, Lauren, why don't we start with the slides if we could. And my hope is that what we'll do is we'll present some of our substantial pieces. Given that I think a lot of the people in the audience are folk that are familiar with the town charter. We'll talk a little bit about what we did. We can take questions, and then once we're done from here, we'll adjourn to a Charter Review Committee meeting, and we have another one scheduled for tomorrow should we need it. Just procedurally, what happens next? Once we get this input, our job is to advance the charter actually to the town clerk, subject to Lauren correcting me, who then brings it to the Board of Selectmen. And the Board of Selectmen, in a very real sense, takes this as a recommendation and repeats the process and then continues for vote. So we're the Charter Review Committee. Lauren, if you could advance the slide. Would it be easier, Lauren, actually, if I shared in retrospect? We'll just do it this way. It's okay. So the audience will tolerate the advance the slide comments. So this is our charge. We're set up by statute. We were asked to review the charter. As some of you may know, the prior charter review committee did not have a successful charter. And the impact of that was that a lot of the language we were looking at was at least 20 and in some cases 30 and 40 years old. Reflecting a town that would have been much smaller at a different dollar level and in a very different place. And I think one of the big summaries of what we did was really to modernize and do a lot of cleanup. There's a lot in the charter that just didn't make sense any longer and might not have made sense at the time of drafting, that we needed to clear up. So we'll consider recommendations and other elected boards, and we'll talk about those in a minute. Let's do another slide. So that's us. So I'm Joe, I'm your chair. Mark Casparino joined us in January of this year. Liz, Matt, Bob, Dave, and Joan have been with us since the beginning. I'd like to thank again all of you, as I said at the beginning, for everything you did and for the way that even we handled both agreement and disagreement. And it was just a great experience being here with all of you. This committee represents a nice mix of people that have served in public office before and people that have come into the Charter Review Commission fresh. And I think that was a really helpful mix. Next slide, Lauren. Oh, and by the way, I have to just stop for a quick second before you do that. Quite literally, the only indispensable name on that slide is Lauren. Lauren worked with us with whether her kids were sick, doing it at night, going meeting on meeting, helping us. The process we went for those who came to our meeting, we always had an updated draft with red lines compared to what we had last time. She went and met with the attorneys and dissected the language. As town service goes, Lauren, I can't really imagine anyone more sophisticated or harder working. So I think from all of us, we'd like to say thank you.
Thank you.
Here. I got to say, Joe, I've never seen anything like it.
It was amazing. It
unbelievable. Unbelievable what she did. And even in my short tenure, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it was really well done. Thank you, Lauren. It wouldn't be possible. So here's our timeline. As I mentioned before, we met in January. We had our first public hearing, what feels like forever, February 2021. We had originally hoped that we would be done, bringing us to about the year mark for what would have been this hearing. However, we went through an extensive legal review process at the end that brought us out a little bit. We had our second public hearing in November and our final public hearing, and here we are, April 27th. So what did we want to do? We wanted to clean up stuff. We had some things within the charter that we use the phrase charterizing. Once something's in the charter and it's charterized, it means you have to have it. And some things, like some committees, don't necessarily need to be there always. We wanted to give flexibility to the Board of Selectmen and the town to change things. So we tried to make sure that the charter was just there functioning for what it's supposed to do, the essentials, and leave the rest of it up to the town boards. We talked about a lot of scoping issues. Town meetings. What's the dollar amount to trigger a town meeting? What's the number of people? Dollar amounts and thresholds for a whole bunch of stuff. Town staff was, very quick to point out, hey, if we want to throw out this, it requires a town meeting. One thing that the committee functioned on that I think might explain some of our recommendations, one of our concerns was when everything's a town meeting, nothing's a town meeting. You generate so many town meetings, the public doesn't know what's important, and it really wasn't helping anybody. So we wanted to restrict them and trust our elected officials with smaller dollar items and make sure that when we're engaging the town, it's over something significant. And when in the future, when you see there's a town meeting, you should know something's happening. We're modernizing the charter. We pulled out references to newspapers. That does not mean that things don't get published in the newspaper. That's a function of state statute. But we didn't want the charter getting in the way. We pulled out some timeframes that were in the charter. Things that just didn't really make sense in a charter that was drafted not even before the iPhone. Actually, it would have been before the iPhone, but really even before modern communication at all. And we really wanted to refine some of the roles of elected, appointed boards and commissions. And I think we were somewhat successful at going through some of the language, trying to clean it up and make it so that if you were a new member of a board, you could read the charter and be like, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? And hopefully it would answer that. So significant things, assuring the charter helps to continue the efficient running of town government. This is a point we got overwhelmingly for feedback, that basically that over administrations and years, the town of Madison runs pretty well. So we want to make sure that it would continue that. We cleaned up and clarified some language. We talked about town manager, different forms of government, RTMs. I'd say we spent a lot of particularly the early months talking about this. And something became clear in one of our first attorney meetings is that if the town wanted to consider a town manager form of government, we would be redrafting a very different charter. So it didn't become tenable for this Charter Review Commission to simultaneously correct the existing charter and then draft a whole separate charter. What our belief is that really we should be passing this charter to clean things up, to move it, to get us onto a basis that works. And then if we want to consider a town manager, that should be a separate and narrow question, because another Charter Review Commission needs to redraft a town manager form of government charter. We did talk about town managers too. I don't want to give you the impression we didn't talk about the substance. We absolutely did. I don't think there was consensus for a town manager at this time, but I would say there was a willingness to engage in the discussion, and subject to my members correcting me on that. And we talked about charterizing and tried to remove things. We left statutorily required boards and commissions in the draft, and a few others, if I recall correctly, that you would expect, but we largely left other boards and commissions to the Board of Selectmen. It's a chance for them to combine boards, separate them, add new ones. We didn't need to freeze that in amber for every 10 years. The roles of Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, and the budget process. We clarified some things. 6.4 was revised to encompass the Board of Finance component of the charter. 10.8 was removed altogether. However, we did expand some language in 6.5. What that meant was the Board of Finance can still review expenditures, but they didn't have, we pulled the section where they could write regulations that exist that could control other parts of town. The Board of Finance can see what it needs to see and run the budget process and vote to approve things or not. but not so much clarify exact, to control sort of other parts of town government. The regulatory power looked broad and ill-defined, and doesn't, frankly, the feedback we got from the attorneys is they didn't have another town that had it. For the Board of Selectmen term lengths and Board of membership size, these are two substantial changes. One, we increased the Board of Finance to 7 members. As a former Board of Finance chair, I'll tell you, and Mark served along with me, that 6 members, there was nothing wrong with our 6-member board, but you can see where it is unusual to have an even number. And we found out that we were one of the first. We actually had to answer a question. Why were we a 6-member board? We looked for the wisdom of the town fathers and trying to create balance. No, it turns out what happened was when the statute was first put in for Board of Finance, it said 6 in the Connecticut General Statute eons ago. Everybody went to 7 after that. We were just a town that never updated it. So we put in 7 because usually an odd number board is what would work. The next is, we recognize it's going to be a topic for the Board of Selectmen to discuss. We increased their terms to 4 years. And the reason for that was that we received a lot of feedback that the 4-year term was needed, that it created inconsistency. We received it even from, not just staff, but people that worked with town, that it got very difficult to try and work with a Board of Selectmen that is changing every 2 years. There wasn't constancy, and it created a certain nervousness, I guess is the best phrasing. We talked about online and hybrid access. We revised language to allow government meetings as allowed by state and without the charter interfering. The charter talked about in-person, personal meetings. We just left that to the state because who knows what our future is going to have as I talk to you now in an online meeting. And we expanded access and encouraged participation of unaffiliated voters. So the commission will, by the way, I'm sorry, just on that prior slide, if I could, one of the other things we did just within this, we revised at the in some of our later meetings, the emergency powers section. We took some of the learning and problems that people experienced within COVID, and we wanted to make sure that we modernized when the town can declare a state of emergency, what the role of the first selectman is during a state of emergency, what orders he or she puts in place, and those are then how long they last until ratified by the whole board. We listened to the current first select woman and the board to figure it out. The other thing is we put in language when it came to modernizing the charter to allow to degenderize the terms. Selectmen felt like a strange term these days, but it's what the state statute uses. So we created a section that says they can be selectmen, select woman, or other terms as they all select or as the statutes provide. So we tried to find instances like that where we're getting ahead of the curve, but it doesn't remove the term selectmen at all. A, it's in the charter. B, we just didn't want, it's the board itself. They can determine what they choose to call themselves and follow state statute. There are some bills pending before the legislature at the moment that would address this. So next steps, we vote, we send it to the town clerk. The town clerk submits it to the BOS. The BOS holds public hearing on the final CRC document. I assume we'll remuster there to talk to them. The Board of Selectmen review and process the document. The Charter Review Commission reviews are the revisions, and we send back the final doc to the BOS. And Board of Selectmen approval or rejection, and then they send it to referendum. They publish the notices. The town clerk sends a referendum to the state for approval. There's a date, and we vote on it. And at the end, the town clerk sends the charter to the state if it passes. That's it. And you can also email questions to charter@madisonct.org. But at the very least, I would suggest bring them up here and now. And that way we could talk about it because we're holding a meeting right after this.
Hey, Joe, can I ask a quick question? Is the latest draft of the red lines, is that available on the town website today? You may have mentioned that.
It's actually it's on the website, and it's in the it was in the information for this meeting. I foolishly emailed Lauren a little while ago to make sure I had the latest draft. And I'm like, wait, I'll just go to the town website, and there it is.
Terrific. Way to go, Lauren.
Why don't we start with Justin and then Fillmore? I see those two hands up. Justin,
Hello, all.
thank you for
Can
your
you hear
help
me?
during this process.
You're welcome. Thank you all. And you did answer my question on the town manager, Joe, in your introduction. So thank you for that. I just want to applaud you all. And I'm one for one in agreement with the term of the selectmen, first selectman and selectman being 4 years. So good luck with that. And so my my only remaining question is, I think I noticed when you changed some of the parameters as you were talking about town meeting, I'd probably get them backwards, but if the town is purchasing a property, the parameters were, Board of Finance above 5,000 to 250, and then above 250, it was town meeting. But when we're selling a property, you didn't really change that. That was still 5 and then going to a town meeting. So I'm just curious. I guess I would suggest that they should mirror each other, but I'm sure there's a good reason why they don't. That's my question.
So I'll do what I'll do all night and then go, Lauren, do we have the sections of that? And do we remember our thinking on that piece, or is Justin right? Do we have some discontinuity we didn't think about?
Sorry, I'm just pulling up the document over here. I do believe we kept them different for a reason. And I believe that you guys did that because you thought it was, if we were going to dispose of an asset that potentially the public would want in the future, that should be something that the public got a vote on right away. And I think that was the impetus there.
That sounds right. And I think we were concerned because we weren't sure of the scale of what would fall in the asset category. So we made that one more expansive now that you brought it up. Does that sound right, guys?
Yes.
Yeah. So Justin, I think we were just worried the concern that, yeah, thanks, Lauren. Now, as I think about it, I think we were worried the concerns would be different on purchasing than dumping.
And I'll just quickly answer the question in the chat. The extension of the terms for the Board of Selectmen would not be effective to the current board. It would take place for the next election.
Yeah.
That was in a Q&A.
Yeah, and thank you, Dennis. Yeah, otherwise it would create a bit of havoc.
Yeah.
Justin, if that's it, then maybe we can go and listen to the former First Selectman McPherson. And current Board of Finance member. Forgive me, I don't want to short you on your titles, Fillmore.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're a little fuzzy, but I got you.
Okay, well, you called me fuzzy before, that's all right. Okay, thank you for having me. I did send an email to Lauren this afternoon, which I don't know if she got it. And
she sent that to us, yes.
Oh, okay. And Joe, I'm sure you've read it because you're very conscientious about that sort of thing.
Because I read everything you send.
Oh, thank you. But I'll just go over a couple of highlights. First of all, I think you've done a couple of very good things. You talked about them, raising these monetary thresholds to get into the current state of monetary affairs. Having all those town meetings for what in today's terms are small amounts of money doesn't make a lot of sense. And then a big change is taking the boards and commissions, a lot of them, out of the charter. And I've been a proponent of that all along. The U.S. Constitution, for example, does not specify you need a Department of State and a Department of Homeland Security and all those kind of things. These are established by legislation as time moves forward. So I think moving those into the ordinance instead of charter is a major good move. There is, I did notice one incongruity though. It's because the section 8.1 basically says you're going to do it by ordinance and take them out of the charter, but then section later, sections 9.3 and 9.4 talk about a town meeting to establish or to abolish a commission. So an ordinance does not require a town meeting. Requires a public hearing, which is typically something the Board of Selectmen does at the opening of their meeting. But
So if I could, Fillmore,
Yeah.
because I know you've got a couple things, maybe we can do them one by one.
Yeah.
And again, I'm doing the same thing, where I'm just gonna totally lean on Lauren. But am I right that the 9394, that's for the permanent commissions? Is that the distinction that we're seeing in these two? So, and I think the prior section you were looking at, was that 8.3, Fillmore?
yeah, but it refers to them as permanent. Let me
I think our thought process was if a board and commission has been established and has been around for a while, then the removal of that board and commission should go to a town meeting so that if there are issues and there are people that really want to continue it versus creating it, the disbanding of a commission or committee, if I remember correctly.
Well, if I go 1 second, Fillmore, what was the section you were looking at before 9394?
8.1, because I have written it down here. I think that's the one. Let me shuffle through here.
Yeah, I've got it right here. So there shall exist permanent boards and commissions in the town as established by ordinance.
Yeah.
In accordance with any applicable general statute at a minimum to include. Right. So, oh yeah. So Joan, I think is quite correct. Those are ones that exist, right? So we can, I see. There shall exist permanent boards and commissions in the town as established. Well,
as established by ordinance, and down in the at the end of your charter, you say something to the effect that you've got a year to come up with all the ordinances to establish all these commissions. I'm just pointing it out. I mean,
no, I think
clean it up.
Yeah, what we're trying to do is for those that we're removing, and I think this actually now, Joan, I see why you were saying what you were saying. For those that we were removing that were established by ordinance, we didn't want to re-trigger full town meetings for existing commissions. And to create or abandon new ones going forward, we had 9.3 and 9.4 for the permanents.
Okay, well, that's not what 8.1 says.
8.1 says that there shall exist, and they do exist, permanent boards and commissions in the town of Madison as established by ordinance, and they were established by ordinance in accordance with the applicable general statute at a minimum to include conservation, retirement, firemen, benefit. Those are all established by ordinance. They're there. They exist.
All right.
Fillmore, I think I understand what you're trying to say. And the good thing about tonight is we do have the town attorneys on. And so this is definitely something that the committee can review again during the meeting when they're actually looking at the draft and making changes. And I will just say, if my memory is correct on how the language of this particular section in 8.1 was updated, initially we did say something along the lines of the charge of the appointive boards and commissions would be established by ordinance, not the board or commission themselves. And I want to say that it was a prior legal review that took out the charge. So that may be something that we should be putting back in, that the charge of the commissions, but not actually the establishment or abolishment of the commissions, is an ordinance. But I did make a note of that to review with the attorneys when we get into the regular meeting.
And to your point, Fillmore, even if it works, it's confusing. So it should be clarified. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm not complaining about either way. I just wanted to point out.
No, it's good.
Me. Okay. There are, now that I've patted you on the back for doing some good work here, I do have to complain about some of the things that you brought forward. If you look at section 4.2.1, let me, if I can find it here. Where it says, oh, shoot, it talks about the general powers of the first selectman. It says that the first selectman is, as it has always been, is the CEO and the chief administrative officer, unless you hire somebody to do those jobs. In other words, unless you go hire somebody to be the chief executive, in other words, a town manager. So it sounds like this is sort of a backdoor way that with some sort of a hiring vote, you know, a 3-2 vote in the Board of Selectmen, you could end up with a town manager.
So I think the idea, so this is A, 4.2.1A, I think. And one of the things that we were trying very hard to do, and you may remember this, there was some like orphan language about hiring not a town manager, I'm trying to remember what it was, like a town administrator.
Chief administrator.
Administrator, yeah.
Yeah, and we're trying to make it clear that the first selectman can delegate powers and run the town any way the first selectman wants.
Sure, and that's always, yeah, you can hire, and we've always had, including currently, some very savvy and knowledgeable people who are taking on more and more authority as has been granted. But it should not include CEO or chief administrative officer.
Well, the way I would look at the language is, you know, be the chief administrative officer, or be the chief executive and chief administrative officer of the town, or oversee the duties of the positions if so delegated. So if they're delegating some or all of their authorities, they're still the lead manager. And it's been an issue in the past as to how much authority they can delegate, and we just didn't think that was an operation for the charter. You're elected, you're running the place. And
Yeah.
what you administer and what you don't is up to you. You just put it on to employees, and then, you know, it's up to you to oversee it. You're still in charge.
I would agree with that.
And I think that one of the things is it's not changing our form of government. Even if somebody's hired as a town manager, the first selectman and the Board of Selectmen still have direct oversight. The first selectman would have direct, if that's the name that they're given. What we're trying to say is chief administrative officer, chief executive, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But it's not taking out the town meeting form of government. It's not taking out the boards and commissions and things like that, because we didn't feel that that was going to be in our purview this time around.
Okay, so you're saying that that you can the chief executive and chief administrative cannot be delegated.
No,
You
no. The way this reads, they can. So if you're sitting in the seat and you look at it and say, "All right, I'm going to divide I'm going to look at senior staff and say, you're going to take over my, you know, all of you guys are going to work for X. You know, here's employee one. You guys work for employee one. Employee one's going to give me a report on the 5 of you reporting. Or if you decide you want 3 people reporting to you, or 10, it's up to you as to how you delegate and override and work with it. The charter doesn't require you to not delegate some things or to change how many people report to you. So if you went to I think an example I gave in one of the meetings, if you were a JFK style manager and you wanted 2 chiefs of staff and a secretary, it's one thing. If you were a Ronald Reagan style manager with, you know, 1 chief of staff and sole power, then you could do that. The charter's not in your way, was the goal.
Right. And with the understanding that the Board of Selectmen reviews changes, and if there's any massive increases, the Board of Finance has to also approve. So we felt that there was some checks and balances in there as well.
Okay, so so what you're saying is that that even if the first selectman authorizes person X to be in charge of this and that and the other departments, the first selectman is still the person in ultimate charge.
Yes. So imagine this: someone
Right.
gets the job, says, "Thanks for the check. I'm appointing Mark Casperino there to be the chief executive officer and administrative officer, and to be my stead at the Board of Selectmen meetings. I'm going to Miami. Under that scenario, it'd be very clear the first selectman needs to be removed. They're not managing, they're not functioning, they're not doing their job.
Yeah, okay. All right, then a couple of other comments, and I'm sorry to be taking up all your time.
Please go ahead.
I would disagree with Justin's comment earlier regarding the 4-year term. I think that the people of Madison need to have the opportunity every 2 years to either approve or disapprove of the way things are going. There's not a lot of people these days get a 4-year contract, a 4-year employment contract without any recourse. And so I think that it needs to stay at 2 years and let the people decide whether the continuity is worth continuing. So you all have your own opinions on that, but I would counsel it to keep it at 2 years. If somebody looks on having to run every 2 years as a hassle and doesn't like to get out there, then you're in the wrong line of work. You need to be willing and quite able to get out and meet the folks and sell your story every couple of years.
Yeah, Fillmore.
If I could just, can I say something about that? I think we were trying to have it be in continuity with the other boards. The Board of Finance is a 4-year term, the Board of Education is a 4-year term, and many of our neighbors and counterparts, and we did some research that most of boards of selectmen now have converted over to that 4 years. So that was the reasoning behind it.
And Fillmore, I would say, sort of in support of your point, I don't know if there's any magic to this. I think one of the other things we're responding to is not the effect on the people sitting in the selectman's seat, but the effect that they're turning over has on staff, on people that want to do business in town. That was a lot of the feedback we got, that there's a concern that 2 years is just too. Then we tried to think about 3 years. I was advancing the idea that maybe the first selectman's 4 years and then the Board of Selectmen 2 years. But that created a series of kind of like, game theory problems and trying to come up with it. So the proposal is currently 4 years. It's not, it isn't, based in any grand theory other than people are telling us it's chaotic and a problem to be solved. But Joan's quite correct. We're a bit of an outlier at the speed in which we're substituting people in and out. But that was the thinking behind it.
Okay, but if they're doing a good job, then there probably will not be substituted out. They would be reelected.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, then finally, I know you'll be happy when I finally finish here. The section 10.9, you basically wiped out a lot of what the Board of Finance does. We're not allowed, the Board of Finance would not be allowed to have any regulations or anything of that sort. And so I'm not sure exactly what the, aside from preparing the budget once a year, it takes a back seat and goes home.
So Fillmore, I saw your comment on that. And I'll tell you that removing the regulatory authority is something that I was very much in favor of because it was ill-defined and could basically have them take over any employee by regulation. But if you go to section 6.4, I think you'll see some of the language was restored because I had the same concern sitting back in my old chair. I want to make sure that I can review the line items. So if you look at 6.4, some language added in C, we move that up. Review the expenditures of the town agency and may prescribe periodic reports of expenditures and designate procedures governing expenditures. And if you sort of look at that, that gets rid of this big, broad regulatory authority that didn't show what it was. But I think within the expansion of 6.4, the core of what the Board of Finance does is right there. You're overseeing the process, you're dealing with compensation, you're reviewing expenditures, getting reports, and putting procedures in.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad you're putting some things back, but a couple of the Board of Finance regulations that come to mind are the limit on how much we can spend for bonding. And I'm afraid that if we got rid of that requirement, that we would sort of be doing a lot of things on the credit card, like a lot of other ill-managed towns in this state. And regulations regarding how much of the fund balance we don't tap. These are things that tend to lead to our AAA rating. And if those are in Board of Finance regulations.
But if you think
It
about
can
it,
still be policies without having to be a regulation, and those policies can still be followed, and they can still be presented during budget times and during bonding times. So it's not, we were just trying to, regulations are a legislative body thing. Policies can be the financial, as CFO, I have a lot of financial policies. I don't have regulations, so to speak. And that was the terminology we were trying to get away from.
and it's also always been illusory, Fillmore. The idea that one Board of Finance can bind the next is wrong. You're an elected official. You'll vote the way you choose. And there could be a lot of, the way it was actually written was quite confusing, but all the things you're talking about are just the practices of the Board of Finance, and those can continue as they see fit. Just like, frankly, the regulations are nothing more than just the practices of the board written down.
Okay, I would, Joan, you're saying that if we took the Board of Finance regulation booklet and scratched through regulation and said policy, then, all right.
Yeah, go right ahead. But it also means then you can't, the way it was written, if you're Board of Finance chair, if you wanted to pass a regulation that the town clerk can't draw salary except between 12 and 3 o'clock on that account, that regulate, the language was really broad. And that's why we also got feedback. None of our attorneys knew of a town that did that. You may have policies, but the regulatory expression was big and a little weird. It's probably not really what we meant once upon a time. And I don't think it's how we've been using it. We've been using it saying, these are the practices which the Board of Finance does to keep us, AAA rated. They've always only been practices. If you get a new group of members that come in that don't like it, they'll just vote the regulation out.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Fillmore. And
Hey,
thank you
before-
now, and thank you for
Can I
coming.
ask-
Oh, go
can I-
ahead, Mark.
Can I ask Fillmore a question?
Yeah.
So when the email first came out, you had 2 for and 4 against. Now that the discussion has been had around some of the background, what are your thoughts now? How do you feel about your versus how you thought before you came into this meeting today? Do you feel a little bit better about the changes?
I still wish to applaud you for those first 2 that I mentioned. So I haven't changed my mind on those. Good job, folks. I am still in favor of 2 years instead of 4, because I think that, not to be snide, but at 2 years, you need to throw the rascals out if they're rascals. I think that, I'm satisfied, I guess, with my concern about the sort of backdoor town manager. I think that I understand that now. So Mark, I'll back off with that one. I didn't mention, as I did in the letter, about 6 versus 7. That I don't feel that strongly about it. I think 6 has worked well. As I said in my letter, it means you do have to have a super majority. And I thought that was, I had heard back in the day that was sort of the rationale when it was originally set up. And I'll have to look at the last business about getting, and I understand, by the way, your comments about regulation versus policy. So I guess that will take some of the sting out of that. So.
Okay. All right. Thanks. No, I really appreciate that. Just wanted to get that summary helps. I think all of us here too, because I just want to get your thoughts on that. Thanks, And
I think that just sort of wrapping up, the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen serve as a check and balance on each other. And I don't want things to go in the charter that remove that check and balance situation.
Yeah, I think, ultimately, it was part of our early discussion, Fillmore. You might remember when you came to one of our meetings earlier on.
Yeah.
We had received a lot of feedback about trying to clarify those roles and define them and limit back. And frankly, the ultimate conversation we got was meh. We cleaned up some language. Clearing the regulatory authority, I think, is very helpful, frankly. But most of what we have in the process, if you look at it, isn't so dissimilar. We still have the Board of Finance in its role as check and balance throughout the entire process, coming through in a way that's not so different than exactly what we've always done.
Yeah, okay.
We had some challenging feedback, I think, at the beginning, and the more we went through it, the more we had, reinforced some of the way the process is working.
Okay, and fortunately, you have Lauren to look after you.
Exactly right. Otherwise, who knows what we would have done.
We do have that.
One last point I just want to go through, and I know people want to talk, but I do want to point out that when it comes to the town manager, had we had a backdoor town manager, as we learned the hard way, that would have triggered a million other things. Towns with a town manager can spend money without going to the Board of Finance. Towns with a town manager, it's a very different form of government, and the Board of Selectmen would be very much reduced. So there's really no chance that we end up with that equivalent. The town may want that equivalent, but it's not coming through this charter.
Right, and actually, not only the Board of Selectmen, but the Board of Finance would have been significantly reduced, I think, as well. It
Lauren,
really puts a lot of power into one area.
Lauren, do you know who's next? All I have are raised hands. I didn't see the order in which they went up.
Dennis Crow is next.
Dennis. And thank you for your comment in the chat.
Okay. I was going to let it go at that, but when we discussed that responsibility there of the first selectman, and you said there's an or situation there. The way it reads right now, it says, that's 421A, be the chief executive and chief administrative officer of the town, or oversee the duties of these positions if so delegated. There's no or. You are the chief executive and chief admin officer, period. There's no or. There's and oversee anybody where you've delegated some responsibility to, but there's no or.
I think so. I think, it's a good point. I think the issue for how we're looking at it, and unfortunately, I don't have this section right up in front of me. One of the things I think we're trying to avoid is the issue that has come up in the past when a first selectman was bringing up or naming their government, who's doing what. The discussion of no, you can't delegate that to someone else. Instead, we wanted to let the first selectman delegate their authority as they see fit. And that's
may I recommend
the way
the word?
is written.
May I recommend you change the or to an and? And then maybe modify the wording to say and oversee, and oversee if necessary the responsibilities of anyone delegated or who has been delegated to perform some of those duties. It's not an or though.
I see what you're saying. So, and something like oversee any delegated powers of that position.
Yeah.
Lauren, could we mark that in for something to consider? Because Dennis, I see your point, Dennis.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dennis.
Yeah. Lauren, have you got that one?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's all I had. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dennis.
Who's next, Lauren?
Joe Mako is next.
Joe. And thank you for coming to our charter meetings in the process too. Appreciate it.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, gotcha.
All right, so I'd like to thank you for spending a lot of time on revising the town charter. It's a long process and it seems like you've done a lot. My question is, if when it goes to the selectmen and they leave in the 4-year term for selectmen, and the town doesn't like that, and the charter gets turned down, is that the way it's going to be presented? Or will that issue be separate?
So
So
then,
that we can, so all your hard work on taking this antiquated document and modernizing it, will be go to waste if the people don't want to change the 2-year term. Can you
Yeah,
clarify that?
yeah, Joe, you bring up one of my very favorite issues. So early on, as you may recall, and with apologies to former Selectman Walker, former Charter Review Commission Chair Walker, it had been the understanding of the town that the charter had to be presented all or nothing. Joe, you probably remember that just as I do in prior iterations. And quite early on, and luckily this happened because in my own interview to become, to join the Charter Review Commission, I had to meet with Selectmen Wilson and Murphy, and I thought I would read the statute. And I looked at it and I thought, wow, that doesn't sound like anything like what we talked about. So sure enough, we can separate issues out. And I think, hot button issues like this, from the standpoint of the Charter Review Commission, we'd love to see separated out because we really believe the nuts and bolts of the charter needs to be passed. So it's up to the selectmen how to call the vote. But, for me personally, I would think that should be separated out because like you heard in the discussion with Fillmore, there's no magic answer. There's a concern. I think 4 years makes a lot of sense. I don't want to back off of it, but if the town doesn't want it, I'd like to see the charter pass, and I think we're still stronger for it.
Okay, thank you. One other issue, and I brought that up before, was having the planning and zoning elected rather than appointed. And there was actually a town meeting a number of years ago where that proposal was put forth at a town meeting and it passed. The only reason it didn't become effective was because there weren't enough people at the town meeting to make it binding. So my question to you is, did you research that when you deliberated on that point?
So my recollection of that, Joe, is different. That if I recall correctly, what happened was it went to referendum and then failed at the vote. And I remember the vote quite clearly. So that would have happened, back in the Stone Age when I was still on the Planning and Zoning Commission. So I think at that time it had failed a public vote.
Okay, that's not the way I looked at it, but it may be I looked at the wrong document.
No,
But
you might go ahead.
I just wanted to make that point that somewhere along the line, this issue was put before the town. I couldn't find my documents on that, so I relied on someone else's recollection of it.
Yeah, I think though you might recall, and I'm very certain I'm right on this, that did go up for a vote. I believe Tom Scarpati was first selectman at the time, and it failed in the public vote. But I think outside of that, what we did is for our decision was we, like I mentioned to you before, we spoke to past and current Board of Selectmen, Planning and Zoning Commission members of actually 3 separate parties, independent, Democrat and Republican, and this committee isn't recommending a change.
Right. Okay, thank you. Again, thank you for all your work.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks for coming to our meetings. Appreciate it. Walter, I think you're the remaining hand.
Okay, can you hear me okay now?
Yes, gotcha.
Yeah, just one quick comment on the 4-year term. I've looked at a lot of town governments just in the role that I had in my career, and the 4-year term seems to work quite well because of I think the executive nature of the job. I mean, selectmen are both legislators and administrators. It's an interesting combination. And I know Fillmore has a lot of experience with this. He probably could have been elected for life, but he was just elected every time he ran. But I think as we go forward in this, you really need to manage the town, and a 4-year approach is much better for an executive type function. And that's obviously people have different views, but that's mine.
Yeah, Walter, I would say that was very much the sentiment that came to us from, and I do want to emphasize, it's not just sort of insiders. We didn't get that just from people in town government or our own employees. We got that from both groups that looked at this external to us, as well as people that work with other towns, and even came to us and said, look, it's a problem when you don't know if the person you're talking to is going to be there in a year, when you're trying to put a project together. It just becomes an issue. So, and also, frankly, the world has just become a lot more complicated. A lot of these boards, I know from my own experience, it takes a full year to know what the heck is going on. And that was one of the issues too. But thank you for that.
Thank you.
Justin, did I see your hand go up? No, is it back down? Okay. Anyone else have a question or a comment?
No one has jumped in to raise their hand.
Or clearly, well, first of all, I do want to say, particularly for those of you who are here and our periodic long-term attendees, I do want to say thank you for coming to the meeting, and particularly since I know several of you came to several of the meetings to give us feedback, and it's just really helpful. As you can tell with a lot of these issues, it's just trying to find the right thing to do. There's not magic to it. There's just diligence and work trying to go through the charter, and a little bit of trying to figure out what a charter is all about. But so it really helped having people come in periodically. Laura, any of the commission members, anything to say before we close the public hearing? All right. On that basis, thank you, everybody. We're going to now adjourn to a meeting. So Lauren, I don't know how you do that through Zoom, but I guess you'll just do whatever you need to do.
Let me stop all the recordings and then restart them.